Alright, welcome back coders. We're at video 8 already in the series to learn Angular and .NET using VS Code. So congratulations if you've gotten this far. Today we're just going to go over adding a new module and then we're going to assign it to be lazy loaded. So by default Angular will eagerly load the modules, and what that means is all of them are going to be loaded up when the website first starts, when the client first browses to the page. And as you add more and more to your website, this will start to really slow down that initial page load time, especially if you have lots of modules, lots of components, and your site's just getting really big. So we can trade in that initial load time and split it into smaller ones that only occur the first time a module is actually needed. That way, if you have a bunch of modules that most people aren't even going to, they're not going to have to sit there and wait for those to load up before they can start browsing the site. So with that, let's go ahead and switch over to VS Code and get started. Okay, the first thing we'll need is another module. If you already have one, you don't need to do this step, but since we don't have any modules in this series yet, let's go ahead and I like to make a new folder. And I don't like my modules inside of the app folder. I normally bring them out and put them into a modules folder. So I'm going to do that, but feel free to use whatever path you feel comfortable with. And we'll open up a terminal window. The next thing we'll need to do is actually create the module that we want to work with. So we're just going to go ahead and create a module for now. It's going to be a users module. We won't be doing anything specific with it in this video, but we will be using it later. So let's generate an M for module, and we'll just call it user. And of course, Angular is going to call it user module. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and go into that user folder, just change directory. And then let's create a component that we can work with. So we'll do ng space G space C, and we'll just call this the profile, as if the user was going to see their profile information here. Perfect. Now we have a component called profile. As always, it just says profile works, and that's what we'll see when we go to it. I guess the next thing we'll need to do real quick is just assign some routes to this. So in your user.module.ts, we're going to use the router module, and we're going to add for child. And the first route that we'll do, let's just say path. We'll do a blank path, and we'll do a component of our standard layout. Now, of course, you don't have to do this if you're not following the series, but we have two layouts right now, and our standard layout is not being applied to all routes. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And we'll need some children for this. And the children for our route here, we're just going to say that the path, let's make an item, and we'll say that the path is going to be blank again, and we'll do a redirect to profile, and we'll make this the default page of the profile here. And we'll do the path match. Needs to be exact. Let me try that again. Can't remember. Oh, it's full. Okay, perfect. Now let's do another child. And again, it's going to be path, but this time we'll use a path of profile. And we'll just say that the component is the profile component. And that should give us everything we need for this module to actually display its route. Okay, perfect. And then we will go back up to the app module. So into your app folder, into the app module.ts. Now, as you know, if you were going to import this route with the this module with the eager loading, all you would do is you would just come in here and you would import that module. So we would say user module, and that would be it. So let's remove the user module from our imports. And what we need to do is add a route for that users module. So we're just going to do path, and we're going to do user, and then we will say load children. And this is going to make it so it doesn't load until they're needed. Load children, we got this function, and we will say import, and we're going to do the path here. So we'll say source, modules, user, and then user module. And then we need to tell it what module inside of that file. Now right now we're doing a one-to-one, as you know, I believe you always should, but if you had multiple modules inside of one TypeScript file, this is where you would be telling it which module you're talking about. And let's go ahead and fix the syntax on the end. Okay, saving that. You can see we put the path of user here, and then we can go ahead and start debugging. Okay, so we're at the home page. Let me bring up the dev tools, and we'll look at the network, and I'll just refresh the page so you can see everything loading up. Now just make note that at the bottom there's nothing specifying the module. So if we actually go into the /user, which should redirect us to the profile, you can see at the point where that route was actually called, now we have the user module loading up. So that was an on-demand module load based off the routes that we have. Okay, back into our app module. Now this is something that you don't have to do, but I really don't like using the whole paths everywhere. So in TypeScript, what I normally do is I'll come up into my tsconfig.json file, and I'll just add a paths, and inside of that what we'll do is we'll just say something like at modules, and then we're going to say /wildcard, so anything that's trying to import from at wildcards, and then whatever follows it. What it actually needs to go do is look inside of, and then we'll say source, let me go ahead and match the quotes here, source, modules, and then wildcard on that. And if we save that, we can come back over to our modules here, and we can just say at modules. Now that doesn't seem like a big time saver here, but what it actually lets you do is use those same ones up here. So if we wanted to use this layout, if we wanted to use these layouts modules, I guess we did in the users, so let's go over here. You can see this long path for the layouts now, and depending on where you're at in the project structure, sometimes you might just go, you know, relative paths and go up a level or 2 levels or 3 levels, or specify the root. What we can do here is we can just say something like at layouts, and then we'll save that and go into our tsconfig, and then we'll do the same thing here. So at layouts / with a wildcard, asterisk, and then we'll just pass in an array with the one path we wanted to search for that, and we'll say layouts. And if we save those changes, we should see now that our layout should be okay again. Oh, and that's because our layouts is in the app folder here. So now we have a fixed file. And your site will be back to working. Okay, so that was just a little side stop real quick. So we have the user module. I think the next thing, because you saw it lazy load, what we can do is actually implement a different loading strategy. If we collapse this first array here that's in the for root, what we can do is check out that there's actually a second parameter in the for root, and it's called extra options. So it takes it takes an object and it has a property in there called preload strategy. And the default preload strategy is no preloading. So that's going to be the lazy loading that we had just tested. Now, what if we wanted to find a middle ground between the app's initial load time and then also we didn't want to wait until the module was called and have that slight hiccup for the user where it's just a real quick, extra load time on that first module use. What we could do is switch it to Angular's strategy for preloading, and that is the preload all modules. So by setting the preload all modules, when the page initially finishes loading, it will then go load in all of the other modules of the website. So, well, at least they have been configured with this lazy loading syntax here. That's fine, but as you have more and more modules, you're not going to want to preload them all the time either. So what we can do is implement our own loading strategy and find that middle ground where we can specify this module I want to preload and this module I don't want to preload. So let's expand this array again so we can look at our routes. Now, the ways that I've always seen this used is we just use the routes data property, which takes an object. And what we can do is just set our own flags in here because we'll have access to the route and therefore we'll have access to the data in our own strategy. So we'll just set a flag in here that says preload is true. And we'll go ahead and save our changes here. Now right now this is going to do nothing because we have to write our own custom loading strategy. So in our app folder, let's go ahead and do a new file. And we'll just call this the app. Just call it app.preloading.ts. And then so let's create a class, export class, app preloading strategy. And we need to implement Angular's preloading strategy interface. And the one method that we need to do for that is the preload. Now again, I'm always just tabbing off of these things. So just to not have the underlines for a second, let me do that. And we'll need to make sure that we import the of from the RxJS. And that would need to be returned. Okay. So we have a function in here called preload, and you can see this is why I was saying that we were going to actually have access to the route data. So that's the first parameter that it's getting. And then it's getting a function passed in, a callback function basically, that we can call if we want the preloading to occur. So, well, we're going to pass it back in the observable that will get called, but let's go ahead and what we can do is let's just keep that return of null and we'll just say if not route, meaning well, the route's of course going to be there. If there's no route.data, or if the route.data.preload is either not set or false, we'll go ahead and return not to do the preloading. Otherwise, what we'll do is return the function that's going to return the observable that's going to get used. So that should be enough to test this out. Just double check. We have our data preload is true. So now we need to tell it to go ahead and use our strategy, which was the app preloading strategy. And that reminds me, we're going to actually have to make this a service that we can inject. So let's go ahead and provide it to the app module here. We'll just say app preloading strategy and save that. And the last thing we would have to do was come back to our app.preloading.ts and add the injectable decorator. And nothing fancy on that. That's just going to be above our class, and we'll add that. Now going back to the browser, if we refresh our page, you can see that it did preload. And if we go into our app module, we had the preload set to true. Now if we switch that to false, and we save our changes and go back to the browser, if we refresh the page, you can see that this time it did not get preloaded. But of course, if we go to a path with that user, you can see that then the module got loaded. And that works perfect. So now we have our own loading strategy. Now let's say we want to just take this to another level and say, you know what, when the app first loads, or when this module first loads, I want this one to wait a certain amount of time before, preloading even. What we can do is we can just say something like Preload Delay, and we'll just pass in, let's just say 3 seconds. And this will give us the flexibility. We haven't implemented this yet, but this will give us the ability to actually put a little delay between some of the different modules as they load. Maybe space those out a bit. So let's go into our app.preloading.ts and actually implement that. So we'll need to still check if they don't even want to preload, it doesn't apply, so we'll do it after that. And we'll just say if route.data.preload, I think I called it delay. Let's double check that. Preload delay. Then what we want to do is, I guess we would do a timer, and we'll just say, how long is the delay? Well, the delay is the route.data.preload delay. And then what we have to do is pipe that, and then we can do the merge map on it, which is going to combine the observables and just make sure that we're just returning the one observable still. And inside of that, what we'll do is return the function. And that should actually, that's going to be a return. Let's import the timer from RxJS. We'll also have to import the merge. Oh, we got the merge map imported. Oh, and of course, we need to call this properly. There we go. So if we've passed in a preload delay, we're going to use the observable timer. And then, of course, upon that ticking or completing, it's then going to call the function as an observable, of course, that gets passed back. So now we have a preload delay of 3000. Let's go ahead and go back to our page. And then if we just refresh the home page, after a 3-second delay, it should have preloaded, except for we still have the preloading turned off. So going back to the code, we'll do a true. We'll save that change. And now going back to the browser, I'll refresh it one more time. After the 3-second delay, you can see that the user module was loaded up. And that can be done with as many different modules, different flags, different timing. And you can do other things with the preloading strategy. It's just if you decide you want to do something, the route.data is the perfect place to pass those parameters in. And that's going to wrap things up. I appreciate you guys watching the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.